Hello and welcome to New Mandala TV. I'm Ross Tapsell from the School of Culture, History and Language here at the ANU, and I'm here with Associate Professor Greg Feely from the Department of Social and Political Change here at the ANU. They've brought us back here by popular demand. I believe, Greg, we've come out of our offices into the bright lights of the studio to talk about the Indonesian election, Australia-Indonesia relationship, and generally there's been a lot happening. Tony Abbott has gone and visited again. He's been in Batam with SBY. We had a debate last night, the first of 5 debates at the Indonesian election between frontrunner Joko Widodo and Prabowo Subianto. And so here to discuss all these recent events and to fill you in on what's been happening, if you haven't been watching incredibly closely, is Greg. And Greg, first perhaps we can start with the debate last night. What was your view on how it went for the two candidates, Prabowo Subianto and Joko Widodo?
I was surprised because Joko Widodo did much better than what I and a great many other people were expecting. He's had a fairly flat run-up to this part of the campaign, and whereas Prabowo has been speaking very well on the campaign trail and has been very disciplined in the way he's been getting various messages out to various audiences. And indeed he did that last night. He performed exactly as we expected him to, which was very professionally. But the surprise was the fact that Jokowi was, I thought, very effective in how he spoke. There was something quite distinctive, in fact, in his delivery, in the kinds of things he was saying. I think he very cleverly built on his image as a person who is close to the people, concerned about the fortunes of the ordinary person, and someone who was very determined to put into place policies that would help Indonesia more broadly rather than perhaps people well placed. Prabowo had similar messages to that, of course, as well, but I thought the way I saw the events, interpreted them, was that Jokowi was much more interesting in what he said than Prabowo. He sounded less like a run-of-the-mill politician.
So just for a bit of background, I guess we had Jokowi looking like he was going to be a shoo-in earlier in the year. Everybody was talking about Jokowi effect and that this was, his polling spectacularly. Then now, on the lead up to the debate, we were thinking it's getting closer to almost, potentially 50-50. What happened there? Why has it become much more of a contest than was first expected?
A number of things are happening. The first is that particularly during the election campaign, the parliamentary election campaign, I think as we spoke about in the preceding interview, Jokowi and the party that's nominating him, Megawati's PDIP, did much less well than expected. And a lot of the advertising during the election campaign was not focusing on Jokowi, who was their main electoral asset, but in fact was more featuring Megawati's daughter, Puan Maharani, who was the person who had the final say in the PDIP's election committees. So they had misplaced focus in their advertisements, and they probably squandered a lot of money and lost a lot of momentum because of that. Following the election campaign, Jokowi also seemed somewhat out of sorts. There was a lot of tension between him and the senior leadership of PDIP over a whole lot of things. Who would be his running mate, for example. Lots of things to do with policies and the structure of the next government. So for a while it looked like Jokowi was somewhat out of sorts because of these battles. I think in the last couple of weeks we've seen him get back on message and start campaigning much more effectively in a way that we know that he has been able to do. We saw him do in Jakarta a couple of years ago, and he's clearly done when he was the mayor of Solo in Central Java, going back over the last decade. So he's returning somewhat to form.
Okay, and with the election, of course, last night, seemingly showing off some quite impressive public speaking skills that people thought that he may not have had in him. So
yes, exactly.
A good sign for his team, I suppose, there. Can we talk a little bit about Prabowo's campaign? It was quite controversial for a while there, looking like a lot of these hardline Islamic parties and groups were joining his campaign, supporting him. I believe he said that he hasn't lobbied for them to specifically join his campaign, but indeed they have done. I know you're very close to this type of research in Islamic parties. What is your view of this?
Well, I think the first thing to say about Prabowo is that he has been campaigning extraordinarily effectively, not just with regard to Islamic groups, but basically as Jokowi has had a problem with one after another of the potential coalition partners for him, they have very quickly been mopped up or very quickly been embraced by Prabowo. So he's been trying to take every single opportunity he can to have the broadest possible coalition and to attract support from as many potential constituencies. And so he's been very effective with that. So the Islamic constituency is but one of those constituencies that he's seeking to appeal to. And so you mentioned the Islamic Defenders Front, FPI, is one of the most controversial groups that's joined his group, somewhat reluctantly. They gave rather conditional support to him. And for groups like FPI and other strongly Islamist groups, Prabowo represents the lesser of two not particularly attractive options, or the lesser of two evils in a way. They have question marks about his own commitment to Islam. They know that he comes from a religiously plural family, and they know that at times he can speak in a very religiously tolerant way. But they are also detecting the other signals, which are that he supports their campaigns to purify Islam, to limit the risks of conversion of Muslims by other religious groups, and Prabowo has been targeting those sorts of groups. So I think that's really something that he's been doing very systematically, and that's one reason why he's been closing the gap on Jokowi.
More broadly on the election itself, I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about the black campaign. I mean, Jokowi, is he a Muslim or not? All of this ridiculous online scandal that occurs, Prabowo and his wife and so on. How are you viewing the election more broadly in terms of being free and fair? Is something many Australians, of course, don't realise is that Indonesia is a democracy. Is this going quite well and to be expected, the whole democratic process so far?
Well, I think what we're seeing in Indonesia is something much more akin to a US presidential style campaign where there is a lot of black campaigning. And in fact, it's rather like what happened to Obama in the last election, where prominent opponents were questioning whether he was a US citizen, what particular faith he had. So Jokowi has been facing these questions about whether he was in fact born in Singapore, whether he was born a Christian, and so he's having to deal with a lot of those kinds of issues.
And is this just part of the parcel of the great festival of democracy that is the elections, or does it worry you in terms of the democratic process?
I think we need to expect this kind of campaigning, particularly in a country that is so focused on social media as Indonesia is, much more so than Australia. And I think there might be something specific to this particular campaign because Prabowo has in the past made much use of people with experience in America. He may well be doing so again on this occasion. He may also think that this is his last chance as a presidential candidate. He will be in his late 60s in 5 years' time, and he may
Having
not.
tried previously as well.
He's tried previously, so he may be pulling out all stops. There is a perception in the Jokowi camp that Prabowo will do almost anything to get elected, and this may also be feeding some of their responses to it. So that's why we're having this tit-for-tat campaign between the two sides. Okay,
so let's talk a little bit about the Australia-Indonesia relationship. I guess the obvious question lead in is to say how will a Jokowi presidency or a Prabowo presidency affect the relationship more broadly? What are your views on this? I guess people have been talking about SBY as being this great friend to Australia. It's that it's only going to be worse. It's only going to be downhill from here once SBY leaves. SBY did, of course, withdraw the ambassador twice during his presidency. Do you think a man like Jokowi would be that style of president, or do you think actually the blank page might be a good thing for the relationship?
Yes, I think we would have, there will be some difficulties, I'm sure, with Jokowi because his basic standpoint is as a nationalist, and he's probably much less inclined to accommodate Australia than SBY has been. SBY sees himself as Indonesia's preeminent statesman, a figure who's strutted the international stage in a way that no preceding Indonesian leader has. And so he likes to feel as if diplomacy is one of the things he's very strong at. Jokowi will feel much less that way. He will be probably more guided by what his foreign minister tells him. There'll be some pressure within PDIP as well on this matter. So he could well react strongly on certain issues, but I think overall he'll be a fairly pragmatic and moderate leader of Indonesia. Prabowo is much more difficult to predict because his range of behaviour really spans the spectrum from quite militant remarks. The other day, for example, he was quoted as saying that Indonesians should not be the slaves of foreigners. So he has this very graphic, very provocative language on occasions. At other times, and he certainly rails against capitalism, global capitalism and its exploitative effects as he sees it on Indonesia. Yet at other times he cultivates the goodwill amongst the international community and talks about being very open to global business. So it's hard to know where exactly he's going to position himself, and particularly how he might react to any crises that emerge in the bilateral relationship. Were we to have another beef crisis, hopefully not, but if there was turning back of multiple boats of asylum seekers, that could be the kind of issue to which Prabowo responds very angrily, and we find the bilateral relationship plunged into a very serious period of tension.
So Tony Abbott visited Indonesia and had, I believe, a 40-minute meeting with President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono. There's been talk that the relationship is now back on track, things will now return to normal. How do you view this? I mean, SBY, of course, will be done by October. Do you think this is an important step for the relationship? Was this a positive meeting, or do you think that really by October it's not going to matter?
I think the Australians are very keen to have the relationship normalised before SBY leaves office, and that seems to me a very wise attitude to have. It's been reported in the press that the Code of Conduct, which has been the condition that Indonesia has set down...
Well, they've agreed to later agree to eventually sign a Code of Conduct, right? Is that where we're at? Or
I think we're a bit further advanced than that, and it sounds like previously... Foreign Minister Marty Natalegawa has been the person almost personally drafting the codes of conduct contents, and it appears as if the President has given him very firm instructions that he wants this settled quickly, and so there are reports that we have a much simpler document, one that would be much easier for the Australians to accept without any major change, and therefore, if that is true, well then the stage is set for fairly quick signatures to be attached to that document and for resumption of normal relations. Okay. So I'm quite optimistic, in fact.
Great. Well, on that optimistic note, we might end there. This has been New Mandala TV. We're covering the election with daily articles from people who are in the field, from ANU academics, and indeed from academics from all over the world who are writing in for us to comment and write analytical pieces about the election. It's been a huge success for us this year. So if you're interested in any of this stuff, please continue to read our articles and sign up and comment. Thanks for watching.